Hi, this is Richard Campo from Raise Capital Partners. I wanted to put this video together for you for the key things to think about when you're looking at a buy-to-let mortgage. So buy-to-let mortgages aren't like residential. They're assessed primarily on the rental income, although your income can be factored in, which I'll touch on briefly. So the two key drivers when looking at a buy-to-let mortgage are the level of deposit and what's called the ICR cover. We'll come back to ICR in a moment because that's a bit more complex. So for the first point around the deposit, that's quite straightforward. Most banks require you to have around a 25% deposit or more in order to offer you a buy-to-let mortgage. Now, sometimes banks will go as low as say 15%. That depends on market conditions. So when things are tougher, banks tend to require bigger deposits. That does flex around in time, but generally 25% is the market norm or more, as I say. The ICR cover, now this is the complex bit. So this is ICR stands for interest cover ratio. So mortgages had a big move over the last few years around affordability. So assessing the income and then how much a loan could be granted off the back of that. So where that sort of differs, if I use sort of the old world, as it were, and let's do some really simple examples for the sake of maths. Let's say you wanted to borrow £100,000. In the old days, what banks wanted to see was that the rent exceeded the mortgage by 125%. So let's use that arbitrary example. So borrow £100,000 at, let's say, an interest rate of 2.5%. That's a mortgage payment of £208 a month. So times that by 125% means that your rent needed to be £260 a month or more, and the bank would offer you the loan. And again, if you're borrowing £1 million, times that by 10, that you get the idea of how that works. Now with the ICR cover, it does complicate things a touch. What banks do now is ignore the rate that you pay. They'll assume an interest rate generally around 4.5% because that's the highest rate you're likely to pay during the lifetime of the loan, and then stress that further by 145%. So let's use that same example of borrowing £100,000. If you take a £100,000 loan at 4.5%, that is £375 a month. And then you increase that by 145%, that means the rental income needs to be £543 a month. So you can see the massive difference between the old world and the new. So where you need to be is within those two thresholds. So somewhere between 260 to say 543, I think it was, per month will be that you can support a loan of £100,000. Now, that's the most basic calculation. It may be that if you have a high value property, and you have a small loan, fine, it's going to fit, it's really, really easy. But if you're looking to max out the leverage, then this is something you really need to pay attention to. A couple little caveats around this is that if you're a higher earner, what some banks do is what's called top slicing. So they'll allow any spare income you've got to surplus the rental income, so that makes it a lot more affordable. Some banks work in a completely different way. If you take, say for example, a 5-year fixed product, because that calculation doesn't have to fit, so that calculation might be a lot easier to fit in still. And thirdly, it might be a case of you do it through a limited company. Now, I don't want to get into a taxing because we're not tax advisors, but particularly if you are a higher rate taxpayer, it's definitely worth considering looking at a limited company route because you're then liable for corporation tax, not personal tax. So again, we're not tax advisors. Have a look at it because the calculations work more in the old world, and also it could save you a lot of tax as well. So please do get tax advice. We can talk you through the principles, and if it's applicable, then obviously we can move forward, but do speak to an accountant before you do anything on that. So that's sort of roughly the assessment and how it works. So like I said, it's a bit variable, a bit complex. There are some simple ways around this which we talk people through, but that's broadly how it works. Once you've got through then the assessment of the loan, then it's the same as any normal mortgage really in terms of how you structure it. You can have an interest-only loan, you can have a repayment loan. Most mortgages do default to interest-only for buy-to-let, but it doesn't have to. Because if you do want to own the property and give you an income into retirement, there might come a time when you want to put that on repayment. Again, go back to the tax thing, which I won't get into, but there are tax connotations, but do think about it because if you want to hold on to it as an income generating asset further down the line, you probably want to pay the loan off. If you don't, if you just want to realise the equity and sell it at a later date, great, keep interest only, keep your costs low and just sell the asset further down the line. Also, you have all the normal product options as well. It could be fixed or variable depending on what you want to do. Fixed rate is nice and straightforward. It does what it says on the tin. For 2, 3, 5, 10 years, whatever the case, you can fix your payments. And it's quite good, particularly with a buy-to-let, because if you can sort of run that alongside your tenancy or what your fixed costs are, it does make life a lot easier. You can have a variable rate, which is sometimes cheaper than a fixed rate, sometimes not. Sometimes a greater level of flexibility, particularly if you want a penalty-free option. There are much less of those options around buy-to-let now. It is sort of quite simplistic in how the products are offered, but they are available. And particularly with some of the arrangements we have, probably got a few more strings to our bow than most other people have. Appreciate that's a very, very broad overview, and I've gone quite quickly through it just to touch on the key themes. So whatever your mortgage goal is, if this sort of fits into something that you want to do, please do contact one of the team. We'd love to help out and talk you through this rather complex area.